Hello and welcome to this video on dialogue and how we can use it in writing in many different ways. It's the power of the spoken word. All right, let's get to it, shall we? So the very basic definition is that dialogue is a narrative conveyed through the speech from two or more characters. I would say you can even go more than that. You could even have inner dialogue, or you can have a person talking through their plant, or the speculative fiction. You could even go crazy with person talking to an alien. I don't know. Anyway, but it's basically the spoken word, as it were. Okay, now the purpose of dialogue is more than just to convey information. It can do many things at once. What are some of the things that it can do? Okay, well, I like to consider it like a multi-tool where it can do many different things. For example, it can set the scene, it can advance action, it can give insight on each of the characters, the way that people speak, whether it's fair or not. People do judge you by the way that you speak, and can foreshadow future dramatic action. So there are lots of different things it can do, and we're going to look at some of those here in this little video. Okay, so let me give you an example of a scene with dialogue from a book from author J. Lloyd Morgan called Bring Down the Rain. Yes, it just so happens to be me. And no, this is not a self-promoting thing. It just so happens that I know the author and I have permission to use his work because I said so. Anyway, so quick little setup. The main character's name is Derek. He's a senior in high school, and he basically he moved his senior year from North Carolina to Utah, and he's dating a girl named Tiffany, and there's a situation that happens at a dance, and so that sets up the scene. Okay, so here's the scene with the dialogue. "I don't get you sometimes, Tiff," I said. "How can you be so nice like all the time?" She gave a little laugh. Because I choose to be." "It's not that easy," I said. "Isn't it?" I turned my head and looked down at her. "I once lost my temper while I was on a date with my ex. It was over something stupid. I don't even remember what it was. She got all weirded out and told me, 'Now I've seen the real you.' That really bugged me. I've always had a temper, according to my mom and dad, but I try to keep it under control. But am I just pretending? Is the angry guy you saw tonight really who I am, and I'm just faking it most of the time?" Okay, so a little side note here. He got into a disagreement with another student over something. The other student was being a jerk, and he kind of defended himself. And anyway, he got upset. Anyway, um, continue on. Tiffany didn't say anything for a moment. I thought for sure I'd freaked her out. Instead, when she finally spoke, she said, "The nice guy you've shown me and Mr. Angry we saw tonight are both you. Like some sort of Jekyll and Hyde thing?" "Not really. More like different sides of the same coin." "It's not very comforting," I said. "I don't like the angry me." "I can't say I'm a big fan either." She snuggled up a bit closer. I blew out a deep breath, creating a plume of steam in the cold air. "Any suggestions on how to keep Mr. Angry away?" "Yes," she said. "Make the choice." Okay, so there's a lot of dialogue here, and you'll notice that it's kind of interspersed with narration. And so there's kind of, different things. And sometimes, as we'll notice, that sometimes it's very clear on who's saying things and who's not saying things. And there's things. Now, let's look at this same scene without the dialogue, okay? "After arguing with Gary, I stormed outside the gym. I was mad. More than that, I had acted that way in front of Tiffany. I was sure she was going to dump me now. Something similar happened with my ex-girlfriend. I had gotten upset, and she had said how she had seen the real me. How could Tiffany be so nice all the time? I didn't like getting angry. It was something that I had a problem with all my life." Okay. So basically, almost like the same scene, but not nearly as engaging because we're not really having any dialogue. It's basically, this is a kind of, it is a scene, but see how the dialogue really adds something to it. Okay. Tiffany followed me out of the gym. She told me everything was going to be okay. Again, same general information that we saw in the previous scene, just no dialogue. And so hopefully you can see how the dialogue can add all sorts of little elements. Okay. Now, let's talk about dialogue tags. So basically a dialogue tag is indicating who is saying what. Okay. And the purpose of the dialogue tags are phrases like "he said" or "she asked" and stuff like that. So we can, again, clearly say, who we're doing. They attribute a line of dialogue to one of the characters, so the reader hopefully knows who is speaking. Again, it's really confusing when you don't know that. Okay, so How much is too much? Okay, well, let's go ahead and do a fun little activity to find out. Okay, let's check out these different variations of the same conversation. I'm going to the store, Jerry said. Pick up a tin of Spam, George said. A tin? Jerry asked. You mean a can? Cans are round. Tins are rectangular, George said. Says who? Jerry asked. Says everyone, George said. A lot you know, Jerry said. More than you, George said. Okay, so does every single line here really need a dialogue tag? Well, and there's some difference, and there's some disagreements and agreements on, should the said come before the name of the character or vice versa. Personal opinion is that what is the most important bit of information in a dialogue tag? It's who's speaking. Said is really kind of an invisible word. Same with asked. So for me, it's like, I always start with the name of the character. Well, at least I try to, instead of said Jerry. Both are technically correct, but what's the most important bit of information? It's Jerry. Okay. So this is like too much. We don't need a dialogue tag for every single line here. All right, let's take a look at another example of this. Okay. I'm going to the store, Jerry said. Pick up a tin of Spam, George said. A tin? You mean a can? Cans are round, tins are rectangular. Says who? Says everyone. A lot you know. More than you. So basically, we know who's speaking when it's changing because we have it on different paragraphs. We start a new line. And so we just can figure out, okay, well, Jerry and George are going back and forth and they're having this conversation. So we're not really missing out on a lot when we don't have these dialogue tags. But there's still more that we can do here. Let's look at this. Let's look at another example that sometimes folks like to use. I'm going to the store, declared Jerry. Pick up a tin of Spam, requested George. A tin? Jerry inquired. You mean a can? Cans are round, tins are rectangular, stated George. Says who? Implored Jerry. Says everyone, announced George. A lot you know, vocalized Jerry. More than you, pronounced George. All right, some people say, oh, look, I have variety. Declared, requested, inquired, stated, implored, announced, vocalized, pronounced. Yeah, I mean, depending on your style of writing, again, do we have a dialogue tag for every single thing? Do we really need that? Is adding these extra words, really adding much to it? Is it distracting from really what's the most important thing? The most important thing is kind of what they're saying. Okay, again, something to think about. Okay, how about this? Woo, gonna crank it up a notch here. I'm going to the store, said Jerry dramatically. Pick up a tin of Spam, said George imploringly. A tin? Jerry asked inquisitively. You mean a can? Cans are round, tins are rectangular, George said matter-of-factly. Says who? Asked Jerry frustratedly. Says everyone, said George authoritatively. A lot you know, said Jerry dismissively. More than you, said George angrily. Okay, this ly here, you see these lys? That is the indication of an adverb, meaning that this adverb is modifying what the action is, which is the said or the asked, right? Okay, and generally, again, I generally hate to use absolutes. A lot of folks think that using adverbs as part of the dialogue. There's better ways to do that by what's being said and other ways to indicate the mood as opposed to just adding an adverb as part of the dialogue tag. And I'm going to give you, this concept here to help you out. Goldilocks and the Three Bears. So if you remember the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, basically Goldilocks is going through the forest. She runs into the bear's house. No one's there. And she finds three bowls of porridge. One's too hot, one's too cold, and one's just right. And then, she finds different things, and eventually she gets tired and wants to take a nap. She finds a bed. One's too hard, one's too soft, one's just right. So how much, dialogue tag should we use? Just right. Just right amount, okay? So now let's look at this one. Okay. Same scene, but now we're adding a little narration into it. I'm going to the store, Jerry said. He reached for his coat. Not looking up from his Nintendo Switch, George said, pick up a tin of Spam. A tin? You mean a can? Cans are round, tins are rectangular. Says who? George sighed. He set down the game controller. Says everyone. A lot you know. More than you. George waved his hand dismissively and went back to playing his game. Okay, so now we've added a little bit of narration here to kind of help set a little bit more of what's going on. So we got Jerry, he's leaving, he's going somewhere. And yeah, he's reaching for his coat. So generally, I mean, we don't have to, make it stupidly clear, but if you're going to reach for your coat, you're going outside where it's going to be cold, and so it's going to be an inconvenience. And what's George doing? He's playing video games. He's not even looking up. He's just, hey, if you're going to go out and give me something, right? Well, that's kind of selfish of George. So that shows us something about him, and kind of maybe how his phrasing is. And again, then we have this George side here. Okay. So George side, that's an action. It's not a dialogue tag. It's something that he did independently. And he set down the game controller. So finally he's got, this indicates a lot of, his frame of mind. And then, it's like, what is he going to say? And then he says the thing, And then eventually George is kind of like, fine, waves his hand dismissively. So that really indicates, this by like his waving his hand dismissively, it's like, more than you. You can almost hear the change in the voice of what's being said by the narration that's included with it. So some final thoughts on basically when it comes to dialogue. Really, it depends on your style of writing. You want dialogue. Dialogue is great as far as helping for pacing. Like I said, it can do multiple things. It can, help the characters. It can help with exposition and stuff like this. So there are some things you can do that really are helpful. As I showed with, maybe intermixing narration with dialogues. Don't overdo it with the dialogue tags, and kind of really look. I guess if you're going to write a certain genre, see maybe how some of your favorite authors have done it and use their dialogue and how they formulate dialogue, and see the techniques that work for them. So anyway, there you go.